Hello and welcome to the next episode of Leading During Crisis. And I'm super excited to have my next guest on. A lot of you guys have heard the name before, the company that he's with, Massey Services, and you may have met him in your travels in the past. Adam Scheinberg is the Vice President of Information Technology for Massey Services, and I'm so excited to have him on. Massey, as you know, is, or if you don't know, is the largest family-owned pest control company in the country. And since 2003, he has overseen technology strategy for Massey. He's guided the transition from as a regional player to an enterprise organization with a national presence now. So he's a strong proponent of the arts, as you're going to see when I pull him up here on the screen, and arts education, and is proud to serve as the president of the Mockingbird Foundation, which is an all-volunteer nonprofit organization that supports music and arts education for children. Adam's also passionate about Orlando and he's very active in the Central Florida community. He serves as the chair of the Orlando Repertory Theater. His interest in furthering the technology community has led him to create and serve as the chair of the Orlando Tech Council, which is really cool. He lives in Winter Park with his wife, Jennifer, and two children, Jillian, who's 12, and Jack, who's 10, which is really cool. And we share that in common because my wife is also Jennifer, and I have two children that also start with J's, Juliana and Jocelyn. So really cool to have him here. And let me bring him on the screen right now. Adam, thank you very much for joining the show. Appreciate it.
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Awesome stuff. And listen, I talk about your interest in the arts and arts for children and stuff. And you can see in the background there your drum set, and you have guitars there. Talk to me a little bit about that real quick before we get into it.
Sure. I have always felt that art is a critical part of really everything that we do. You can't be creative in business. You can't learn to deal with people if you don't have some sense of yourself. And you discover that through creativity, through exploration, through the emotional connection that we create with art. I think music is just fancy math. I think art is oftentimes connecting to different mathematical understanding that you have inside, percentage of hue and different color combinations. So I think it's a great way to exercise your brain. Kids learn frequently about inclusivity, and they find their own voice, and they learn about their own desires by pretending to be something or creating something. And I happen to just be a huge music fan. So for me, surrounding a community with the arts is enriching the quality of a community. And you can always judge a community by their support of the arts.
Sure.
And you'll find that through history, every great society valued the arts. So without getting too big here, I think art is a really critical part of development for children and for continuing that growth as an adult.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because even though we're going to focus on IT with this series and even with this episode, there's more to it than that, right? We're all humans and we're all going through this at the same time. And just like Massey, right? Massey is more, to me at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Massey is more than just a pest prevention company, right? There's so much more to it with helping health, food, the quality of our environment. And so there's more to IT than that, just like there's more to you as the individual when it comes to arts. And so I think I would like to start there when it comes to that, right? Because knowing your background, you've been with the organization for quite a while, right? And now with everything that's happening with COVID, I think, having the background that you have with the organization, where you've migrated over to Office 365, you've integrated your own CRM for your sales team at your organization, right? So you've gone through change. You've innovated, you've created, but now here we are talking yet about, again, having to innovate and create change for your organization. And now that you have more of a prominent seat at the table, because your ideas and your innovation is going to kind of streamline what the business does, not only currently, but going forward after we get through all of this. So talk to me about kind of the change that you've experienced from the start of COVID to present day. What has been some of the change that you've experienced there over at your organization?
Sure. So that was a bit of a mouthful. So let me take on a few different chunks. First, our organization does things that I think are sort of perpetually important. I'm a little biased, but we live in Florida and we do business throughout the South and the Atlantic of the United States. There really are termites. Most people don't own anything more expensive than their home. Therefore, the fact that we can do termite prevention is always going to be important. People are never going to want roaches and bugs in their house. That's always going to be something. There is always a benefit to having a green lawn and having healthy soil so that water can be clean for your community. So that's something that's going to maintain. And then irrigation, especially in Florida, but also in drier parts of the country, there's a limited amount of water that we can take out of the ground. And in Central Florida, we're not that far away from sort of maxing out what we can pull out of the ground on a regular basis. So for us, responsible irrigation is critical, and another thing that really is a service that continues to be needed even as the economy shakes and even as we see COVID. So what we do, I've always seen as honorable. We want restaurants to be clean. We want schools to be clean. We want houses to be clean. We certainly want hospitals to be clean. So we are thrilled that we've been able to do that for our communities. And if you know about Massey Services, another thing that you would know is that we support our local communities. We do walks for autism, juvenile diabetes. We support the arts, which obviously is important to me. And we are contributors whenever there's been any sort of disaster like hurricanes and floods and things like that throughout our footprint. So I'm proud to do what I do, and that sort of hits the first part there. What's changed? Well, everything and nothing. And I hate that wishy-washy answer, but to some extent that's true. We're still doing the same things that we've done. We haven't shifted our business plan. What we've done was valuable before, and in many cases it's more valuable now because people have more food in their house and they're in their houses more. So, and of course, we know people have taken on all sorts of projects around their house. So I'm thrilled for what we can do. How have things changed for us as a business? That's fairly significant. We're still doing the same kinds of services, but we're concerned about the safety of our team and the safety of our customers. Certainly, we are doing much more with video conferencing that didn't exist prior to this. Luckily, we had the tools in place. And we have made some big changes to just what we're willing to tolerate. So we have become a much larger SaaS shop just in the last few months, embracing tools like Monday.com and expanding what we do within Salesforce. And of course, we are an Azure shop, but we have deepened our relationship with our cloud footprint. So yeah, tons of modifications on the tech side, but still the same Massey Services that we've been for some time.
Excellent. And so, right now, I think, and I appreciate you sharing that, because right now, I think your team and even you yourself, you're taking more of a strategic role in the business in terms of generating revenue, which, before people think about IT when it comes to, what you do in your industry, it's just keeping the lights on type of thing, right? But that's not the case anymore. You guys are innovating, creating, and what you're doing is helping generate revenue. And being in a market that is competitive, right? Because you have to keep the competitive advantage, decisions are being made based on your ideas and your team's ideas. So talk to me a little bit about how that's affected your team. What role is that playing at Massey?
I have a saying that I've used several times, which is, for most businesses, technology is the horizontal support beam where most departments make up vertical framing. So you don't really start projects without involving IT, because almost every project has some IT component to it. So at Massey, I would not say that IT is defined as a revenue generating department. But I would say that IT is involved in every effort, almost every effort across our company. Our accounting is all done online. Our HR is all done with vendors and third-party services. There are so many, and of course, I don't mean our people. I mean, we rely on software and services that are online. So when any department starts a project, the first people that they're going to include in that project is IT. So every revenue generating project has an IT component. And I think really that was true prior to the pandemic, but even more so now, because now we don't have people coming into our office to sit down. We don't have the same face-to-face relationships as we're kicking new things off. So I'm not sure if that answers your question in its entirety there.
It does, because I wanted to know kind of what the mentality was from your perspective, because I know that Massey does face some competition out there, not only in this market here, in Orlando and Central Florida. I know you guys have expanded now. You're more of a national company now. You're in the Carolinas, Oklahoma, Texas, and I'm sure there's some other states there that I'm missing. But, you guys have expanded now. So not only here in this region, I'm sure you guys are going through competition other places. And so they're probably wondering, hey, because, my whole thing is I'm putting myself in your shoes, right? You came up with your own CRM. You've done a bunch of different things. So I'm sure that they're probably making decisions based on some of the ideas that your team and yourself are coming up with. So that's why I asked that question, and you definitely answered it. So I'm curious, you touched on something which I want to dive into a little bit here. You talked a little bit about some new technologies with working from home and what's been going on now. So what do you think are some of the new trends that you see in IT, but also that you've experienced in your own organization? So I'm talking about like when it comes to IoT or, for example, like AI or maybe even some cybersecurity things. What are some of the new trends you're seeing in the industry, and what have you experienced yourself?
Sure. So let me start with a little bit of a nitpick. I generally object to the word trend, because when I think trend, I think like fidget spinner or slap rap or like jams or something. Right. Trends tend to be hot and then they sort of slide away. And when we talk about tech trends, we're typically talking about something that has a lot of interest right now, and we all believe could potentially be transformational, but will certainly be the norm going forward. So, when people talk, for example, let's get techie, when they talk about like containerization or serverless, they're talking about new ways to do certain things, and they're very trendy to talk about, but I don't think those are trends that will jump to the top of our topics and then slide away. Those are going to be forevermore the way that we operate with our IT infrastructure. So you mentioned a few, and you kind of tipped onto the most important ones, at least in my eyes. I think AI is the game changer. I think we are in the earliest of early days, and we've made tons and tons of progress. And what we can do with AI now is amazing, given what we could do just a little while ago. But what we can do with AI in the future, what I believe will be possible, reminds me that today is like still the nascent stages. I would love to be able to take a massive database of hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes and say, this is what this column is, this is what this table is. I need you, AI, to find relationships that matter. And just let it spin and do things that people cannot. I'll give you specifics. Instead of saying, what is my cancellation rate in this area for people who have the following service? I wanted to look at every data point that we have and find things that no human could mathematically process, that we couldn't even write reports to do, because the data set would multiply so many times by looking at all these data points. And that can be done in pretty specific scenarios. But it's tough to just sit down in front of a data set, give it a few pointers and say, go for it. And I think that's going to be the norm in the future. And that will just change the way that we operate. Right. For us today, the biggest thing is IoT. Sensors are going to change our business dramatically. Not that long ago, we used to put these bait stations in the ground, and we'd have to check them 4 times a year. We've gotten better with what we can do with these things, and now it requires once a year. But there are steps where we'll be able to detect things remotely and just show up. Especially in huge commercial settings, big hotels and hospitals and schools. If we knew, for example, there was activity in a particular spot, nobody wants to hear it, but there are rats and there are bugs and things like that in the world, we would love to be able to spot it before there was ever any reason, without having to do all the manual work. Yeah.
Listen,
So
if you could spot a rat
coming.
if you could spot a rat before I know about it, you would help me earn some points on my husband resume, because if I see a rat, I'm out the door, man. I'm telling you that right now. So
well, we would love to know by detecting the pheromones in the air rather than finding the droppings or finding the chewed up whatever in the walls or on the walls. So we could get ahead of that in a big way if there were routine, affordable, comfortable ways to do it, and if there were something like a proper 5G network that allowed us to communicate with all those devices without relying on clumsy things like customer Wi-Fi or more expensive networks. So
that's this guy right here, Crown Castle, setting up the 5G network. Every fiber route we lay, we're adding some more 5G small cells. So very good segue. I love it. Yeah. Awesome stuff. All right, so let me ask you this question then, because that's interesting that you say that. We know what is I'm not going to use the word trend, but we know that what are some of the things you're seeing from your industry. You mentioned IoT. So now that we're almost 5 months into this thing, I'm seeing not only the pressures coming from my existing customers, but from some of my prospects as well. There's a couple of items that I think that are 3 challenges that I think the IT team is facing these days. One is reducing or eliminating technical debt, right? That's some of the things that they're looking at. The pressure to grow earnings and cut the budget seems to be paramount with at least my customers that I'm dealing with, right? The other thing is increasing the agility we talked about competitive advantage, to have that, all right? Increase the competitive advantage, and also adopting some of these new technology trends forgive me for saying the word, but
sure.
I think, those 3 things, take me through what do you think is the most important right now for an IT organization that is suffering? Remember, put yourself in the shoes. Forget about Adam from Massey. Put yourself in the shoes of the guy who is going through layoffs or sees, a round of that happening potentially. Maybe some of their friends and families have experienced it as well. What do you think right now is the most important thing to focus on right now, if you were going through that?
So again, I don't want to be wishy-washy with answers, but there are 2 angles to this. One, it really is if you are a tech company, and the other is if you're not a tech company, meaning if your IT department is the product. So for most companies, non-tech companies, I would wager that the second, increasing business agility, talking about competitive advantage, that's really what the team is supposed to be doing. I would also wager that most of them are actually focused on eliminating technical debt, because as companies grow, naturally you grow technical debt. You have investment in infrastructure that is no longer supported, hardware infrastructure that's no longer supported. You have structures that begin to age and topologies that need to change, and things change quickly around you, and that requires a commitment to ongoing upkeep. And nobody likes to schedule ongoing upkeep. Nobody really wants to pay for just endless support and still getting the same thing. So IT teams frequently are supposed to be focused on that agility increase, and instead are often focused on eliminating technical debt and maintenance. The third thing, which is adopting new technologies. I think that's what most teams do in spite of their mission, which is actually the second thing. Users don't sit back and say, I'm interested in microservices. I'm interested in you moving me from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service. They don't know about those things. Those are things that allow you to be better poised to work on business agility and increasing your competitive advantage. So I would say all of those are really the answer from a non-tech company. If you are the product, if you are the IT department of a tech company and your product is tech, then I think that third thing really comes more into play, which is staying ahead of the curve, writing in languages that we know we can find good support for, reducing the need for additional CPU and additional memory. Those all become really important. But my forte has always been the former. And so I would say, in summary, working on business agility, competitive advantage is your mission. You're spending a lot of time on that eliminating technical debt because as you grow, you continue to accumulate more of that. And then adopting your new technology is what you continue to do in order to be better served for the second piece.
Got it. Yeah. So for always having
complicated enough for you?
No. I got it. We're always focusing on the mission because whether it's COVID or not COVID, right? That should be kind of your focus. And you shouldn't let, even though we're going through this strange time, you shouldn't let that deviate from what the priority should be. Is that kind of what you're saying, right? Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, you got it. In fact, one of the things that I remember reading some time ago, a phrase that I've repeated many times, is the most expensive thing you can say is, it would be cool if. And if you ever say that with relation to technology, that tends to be a very expensive thing because cool is not the goal when you're running a company. It's nice. It sometimes helps you find people who are more interested in the technology challenges you've got. But ultimately, we have to remember our mission. And our mission is to help our team be successful and to continue to be more successful with the same resources.
Right.
So.
Gotcha. Well, then I want to ask you this, though, because I'm curious, and I'm sure that my audience is probably wondering as well. We're talking about, let's pivot right now to current times, right? Obviously, there has to be a focus on consumer health. There has to be a focus on employee health, right? So, talk to me a little bit about data security in terms of now being contactless, right? Because I'm sure, and I have it in my house where vendors come into my house for different things that I have going on, whether it's the security company guy or whatever. And now we're moving towards this contactless type of solution where before my Massey technician would come into my house and I'd have to sign, whatever that, he did whatever services that day and I'd sign for it. And now we're moving kind of away from that. We talked about this on an episode where it came to the restaurant industry with contactless payments and things like that. When we go to a restaurant and eat and we no longer give our credit card or we no longer look at a menu the traditional way, we look at it on our phone. Everything's contactless. Has Massey gone through kind of a change when it comes to that? And if so, how did you implement those technologies?
Sure. So I'll give you two answers. The first specific and the second a little greater. So from a contactless specific standpoint, yes, we no longer hand you paper and ask you to sign it. We no longer hand you an iPad and ask you to write on it. Those were like day one decisions, just to keep people safe. Those are, I think, low-hanging fruit when it comes to talking about safety. We are not doing contactless payments yet, but that's largely because a very small percentage of our customers are looking for us to walk to the door and ask them for payment at the time of service. The majority are either paying in advance or are enrolled in some sort of auto pay. So that was not a huge focus point for us at the beginning of this pandemic. Certainly, we altered a significant amount of our protocol to create the appropriate amount of distance, wear the appropriate coverings, so that we never are putting our customers in a position where they feel like they're unsafe. Even though we also do all of our internal testing on people, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as that goes, there wasn't a lot of work that we had to do in order to create a contactless experience. We still want to knock on the door. We still want to let you know we were there and ask any questions, but we want to do that at a safe distance and without exchange of any objects. Now, I think you were kind of tapping at the door of cybersecurity as well. So would you like me to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk about that because you guys, I'm sure, have, obviously you have access to my information. So I'm curious to know from my perspective, How are you keeping that stuff secure nowadays?
Yeah, right. So there are when you have 2,500 users, there are inevitably people who make mistakes with their systems and their knowledge. And your goal as somebody who runs a network that large with data that you feel is sensitive and don't want third parties to have access to, your goal is to put the proper safeguards in place so that bad behavior does not equate to bad results. So we've actually developed 11 E-words that we like to associate with general cybersecurity practice. So I'll walk through all of them fairly quickly, and then if you have any questions, I can revisit. So the first would be edge monitoring. This would be putting a standard firewall in place, just something that keeps the general internet at bay. Not the skilled internet, just general nonsense. The second is securing email. This is the number one way that things get through. We have a ton of filtering that takes place with our email gateway. We do all sorts of analysis of the email address, and we compare the actual display name to our executives, and we try to block as much spear phishing. But inevitably, things get through like a link. Users click on the link. The link is a Office 365 lookalike page. We want to make sure that we are educating our users, which is number 3. So email, making sure that things don't come in through email. Secondly, education. People in general are trusting, and even when we put banners that say this is external, people still fall for it. So education of your users, using services that will actually try to get them to click the wrong thing, and then being able to alert them that they made those mistakes is a great way to prevent unnecessary clicks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Next, encryption. So data at rest should not be, sensitive data at rest should not be in a position where anybody can just open up a database and look at it. Number 5 is exfiltration. You have to be aware if large amounts of data are leaving your network over the internet, and specifically where it's going. Are you making a ton of connections to Russia or Romania unexpectedly? So that would be egress. Exfiltration of data, meaning how much, and egress, where is data going? I don't expect to see a ton of our data going to Eastern Europe. If I see a ton of that traffic, I think something is wrong. Mm-hmm. Exfiltration 5, egress 6, 7, endpoint protection, meaning on each computer, if something happens, if there's a ransomware attack, if there's anything like that, I want it immediately cordoned off, and I want that endpoint to be basically sacrificed. Mm-hmm. Sorry, user. Sorry, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. You clicked something you shouldn't have. Your PC is excommunicated from our network, to use another E, mm-hmm. and we will re-image you and get you something.
Right.
8, enforce multi-factor authentication, right? We don't want somebody to be able to log in from somewhere remote if we're not expecting that. 9, external penetration testing. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we're not leaving doors open that shouldn't be open. 10, elevation of rights. We don't want people using accounts to access things that they shouldn't be accessing. And finally, extracting administrative rights, which means people who have ability to get to the whole network should not be using those administrative accounts day to day. It's more likely if I'm using an account that it's going to be compromised. So my account is a user account just like everybody else's. If my account gets hacked, it's just like any other user. They don't have access to anything special. My administrative account is distinct, and it's only used to access resources I shouldn't. So that's a much longer answer than you wanted, but
it's
those
good.
are the 11 E's.
Let me tell you, Adam, what you just touched on there, while it's technical, right, my audience needs to hear that, right? Because we know this stuff. As IT, look, I'm not an IT professional. I'm not a practitioner, right? I sell to you guys. But I understand I put myself in your shoes, and I understand what the needs are. And the IT professional knows not to click on this stuff. Before COVID, here's where I'm going to connect the dots on all these episodes. Every one of the IT practitioners that I'm interviewing, the common thread is this. We know not to click on certain links. We know what the dangers are to that. But when COVID hit, we had a lot of employees now that started working remotely that didn't understand the best practices of what it was to work now either on a company issued device or working from their own device. And so they'd be working all day at home. They'd leave their laptop up. They're connected to a VPN. This is some of the stuff that I've heard, right? Then their wife or their kids come in and they want to check their Gmail and they go, oh yeah, just my computer's up. Go online and check your email. And they'll go on to google.com and check their Gmail account. And they would click on something unbeknownst to the employee. And now, boom, here we go. Now we have a ransomware attack or something else because they're into the network. And I'm sorry for those who are not in IT that are watching this episode or watching this series. Our weakest link seems to be, when I'm connecting the dots on all these episodes, our weakest link seems to be our employees, right? The people who don't know what we know, and they're learning, and there's ongoing training, and we're doing that and we're working through it. But some of the things you just touched on, Adam, are critical for the other IT guys who are maybe not taking some of these steps. Those 10 steps that you just broke down there are critical when we talk about data security, cybersecurity, remote working from home. So I really appreciate you saying that. I think you just hit a home run. I got to figure out a way how to cut that piece out to promote that. That was highlight. So awesome stuff. I really appreciate it.
Let me build real quick on what you just said there, because if we know that our users are, your words, the weak link, then I think we have to graduate to understanding that if we know that our users are going to do the wrong things, that it is now us. We are the weak link if we make a mistake, because we know that's going to happen. So it's our job to prevent that. If I know that a user is going to enter their credentials into a crafty phishing site, then I need to make sure that just gaining a user's username and password is not enough to access sensitive data on our network. And I can do that with multi-factor authentication. I can even do it with something weaker, like the source IP address has to be from our corporate office. There are other things that we can do there. You mentioned a VPN. We're in a post-VPN world for many people, where I can put tools on my computer that only route very specific traffic on very specific TCP and UDP ports to very specific servers, so that you don't actually need a VPN where your home PC becomes a part of our network, but rather a client where very specific requests are going to the right place on our protected network, and everything else is just your laptop on the internet. And when you mess up your computer, but you don't really do anything that's going to infect the rest of our network. So I think there is an opportunity for us to recognize that we know what we're dealing with, and it's on us to protect for that.
Yeah. Awesome. Listen, I got goosebumps because I think that the whole purpose of this episode and the whole purpose of this series is to add value to the IT community, not only local here where we're in Orlando, but also whoever else is watching this throughout the rest of the country. I think that's critical. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And now I don't want to scare folks, but these are the realities, right, that we talk about on a daily basis. When I engage with IT folks, these are the conversations that come up. So I don't want to scare anybody, but this is what we focus on a daily basis. So good stuff there, Adam. Let me pivot a little quickly. I want to start winding down and just ask you this question. As we start to see the changes, right, what I'm calling the modern CIO or the modern IT leader nowadays, right, and what we're seeing with this change, I think with all these tech changes, what it presents, there's challenges. We spoke about the challenges at length, but there's also some opportunity there that we can get from this. And I think that one of the opportunities is we're going to start to see some of the folks on the IT teams that are maybe a little bit lower on the rung there may be some opportunities for them to shine with their ideas and innovation and bring some stuff to the forefront that we weren't maybe even thinking of at the higher levels up, because at the higher levels, we're also thinking at it from the business perspective. How it's going to impact, what's the CFO going to say about this, right? And so, but we're having these great ideas and innovating. And I think that some of those IT folks, once they start to shine, it's going to shine a light on them. It may be harder to retain some of that top talent because other companies are going to want to, nowadays IT is more prominent than ever. They're going to want to get that talent into their facility, into their building. So how do we innovate and foster these ideas, but retain that top talent in our organization?
Well, I don't know that I have an answer that is universal for everybody all the time. but I'll share with you a little bit about how we do it, and hopefully it's applicable for other people. So IT exists in most cases solely to supplant standard business practice. What we do is supposed to make things better, faster, cheaper. We are supposed to improve the way that people work. So when we talk about fostering innovation, first we have to define innovation. And I like to say that innovation is that eureka moment where an idea changes the way that something is done. So I just gave a talk recently on innovation, which is why I'm trying to boil this down to digestible bits here. I believe we can encourage innovation, and we encourage it with culture. And what that culture is a long talk on its own, but in summary, risks have to be accepted. Failure has to be acknowledged as a part of success. When you're trying to innovate, there's more failure than there is success. Physical space is comfortable. Mental space is in the right frame of mind. Temporal space, literal time, needs to be flexible enough because we don't sit down and say, I need 5 minutes to innovate. Creativity is valued. You have diversity and variety and alternative perspectives, because if all people see things the same way, there's a very good chance they're not going to have the ability to spot things from another angle. So the first and most important thing is that a culture has to value innovation, and it needs to do some of the things that I just mentioned. Second thing I tell people is ask for problems. Ask your users, ask your customers, ask people what their problems are, and listen to them. And as important, if not more important, is the opposite, which is do not ask them for solutions. They don't know the solutions. If they knew the solution, we would implement the solution. We wouldn't be talking innovation. Solutions are what innovators bring, and we want to solve a problem in a way that somebody hasn't already thought of. And there's a famous Henry Ford quote about, if I asked customers what they want, they would have told me a faster horse. And so it's our job to determine the best solution. Sometimes the problem, when we understand the problem statement, sometimes the solution is not at all what you would expect. Happy to elaborate on that if you want. And then lastly, balancing innovation with continuous improvement, because most work is not, in fact, huge, innovative, change the way we work. It's slow, but meaningful iteration. And so when you look at like the iPhone, to use something that has been analyzed a million times, when you look at the iPhone, it was like transformational the day that it came out. But I think you can make the argument that in the last 13 years since the iPhone came out in 2007, it's mostly been this continuous improvement where we've made small changes over and over and over again. And then you look back and say, oh my gosh, look how far we came. Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe that, I would ask, tell me the next game-changing moment for the iPhone after the first iPhone. And I would wager a significant amount of money that if you asked 10 people, you would not get the same answer from any two of them. Mm-hmm. Because really, we had innovation, but then what we did is we capitalized on that innovation over time. So I think those are things you can do to sort of build an organization that fosters innovation.
Don't ask for the solution. That's what you said. And I think that was awesome.
That's right.
You know, we have to be the solution and create that. Awesome stuff. Listen, I appreciate it. I think, I think this episode is going to open up some eyes, because I'm sure that people were curious to know what was going on from your industry. And, how did you guys keep the lights on, for lack of a better term? And how did you innovate, create, be creative, but also keep that competitive edge that you guys have? So I really appreciate it. My whole thing is adding value to the IT community nowadays, to put take ourselves out of our own shoes, put ourselves in their shoes, and help them kind of come up with some great ideas, how to help their organizations grow and get through this. So I think we hit the mark, Adam, on this one. I really appreciate what you said and did. I think this is going to resonate with a lot of folks. So I just personally want to say thank you very much for participating, because this I know you're a busy guy, and we all are busy professionals, but to give a little bit of that data and that information, I think is going to be super critical. So thank you so much,
Jonathan. Let me tell you one last thing to kind of put a cap on it, right? Mm-hmm. We have what we proudly refer to as the 5 functions of management. We want to grow our business. We want to service our customers. We want to control our expenses. We want to collect our money, and we want to recruit, hire, and develop our team. Mm-hmm. I would say that one of the best ways to answer the question, how do we keep things going during COVID, is we don't engage in projects and we don't spend money if it doesn't help do one of those things. Mm. Right? And ultimately, I think it really is that simple. We exist to support our business. And when we don't forget that, we're successful.
Interesting. No, I love it. I think that's going to resonate not only with IT, but also in my world with sales as well, right? Think about it when whatever you're selling as a product, understand what the buyer is looking at. And if you can understand what the buyer needs are, then maybe you can see if your product works for that. And if it doesn't, don't stop asking to meet with them, because you need to make sure that you fill that gap. So not only from an IT perspective, which is important from a sales perspective as well. So thank you, because I think that's where we can drop the mic and put a bow on this one. That is awesome. So I appreciate it, Adam. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for your knowledge, and thank you for what you guys are doing in our community locally here. Thank you what you're doing in your personal life with the arts and music for the children. Really appreciate that. So I'm just super excited that we had this episode. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Awesome stuff, guys. Well, that was Leading During Crisis with Adam Scheinberg. We're super excited that he was here to join us and join us on the next episode as we talk with a cybersecurity expert, kind of capitalizing on what Adam did say in this episode. We're going to focus kind of our attention on cybersecurity and how we're continuing to lead during crisis. See you guys on the next episode. Take care.